Today on Teach Me How to Vegan, came across this article which was based on the work of Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so, because I thought this was interesting because everything we've talked about was actually spot on with this.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, I'm just like, that's why I wanted to bring it up and talk about it, was because according to this author, there are 3 necessary components for behavior change. But then taking it one step further, behavior change has to be motivated by a higher purpose, by the willingness to subordinate what you think you want now for what you want later.
That's good.
Right?
I just had a little self-reflective thought.
Welcome to Teach Me How to Vegan,
A podcast where we explore how to switch to a vegan diet.
I'm Tony, a health educator, fitness instructor, and plant-based eating program manager for Animal Protection of New Mexico.
I'm Mickey, a stay-at-home homeschooling mom and vegan cook who likes to play in the kitchen.
Our family stopped eating meat in 2007.
And we went vegan in 2016. Now we like to share with others what we've learned.
Thanks for joining us.
Let's get started.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us, as always. Today we're talking about ex-vegans and how to avoid being one.
Oh. Okay.
This kind of continues it's a continuing conversation and theme on the podcast. You know, we did an episode on staying motivated, and that's definitely a big part of it. And there's some underlying overlapping themes in that, in staying motivated. And we also did an episode called How to Stay Vegan, a new study.
Yeah.
And where we looked in depth at that study that came out about what makes people stay vegan or not. And so, people were really interested in that episode and talk, actually.
Okay.
So it'd be great to, thought it'd be great to keep going even more in depth and talk about, how to stay the course, essentially. Of course, we're staying within the lens of behavior change theory and what we've observed and understand about this process and what's helped us not be ex-vegans. We want to stay current vegans.
Current vegans, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So first off, I wanted to just talk about, I think we touched a little bit on this in the Staying Motivated episode, but some common themes among ex-vegans, right? The first one is it's common that there is some extreme dieting happening.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like people go vegan for their health and they cut out all salt, oil, sugar, processed. Like it gets really extreme.
Yeah, there's a lot of some of the ex-vegans, some of those videos on YouTube tend to get lots and lots and lots of plays. And what I do to not give that any more plays, I go and I start it and then I pause it like right away and I just go through the comments. Sometimes if it's somebody that I'm curious about, I might watch part of it. But typically what I find is, what I have seen anyway, a common theme, like you say, is this sort of extreme diet restriction.
Restriction, yeah.
Is what it ends up being.
Extremely restrictive.
It's a very restrictive way that they were eating. And I think if you go extreme on any dietary plan, any dietary way of eating, if you go very extreme on it, you're gonna have negative health consequences. And because a lot of these people are like, I stopped being vegan because I needed blah, 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 blah. And it's all things that they could get in a plant-based diet if they weren't eating in such a restrictive way.
Or the other thing is, if it's not like a nutrient issue, it's just not sustainable.
Yes.
Like who can, in any lifestyle choice, diet or otherwise,
Yeah.
that type of restriction and extreme reaching it's not sustainable.
It's not. Yeah, it's really not. And I think there's probably studies out there that have, not necessarily correlation equals causation, but extreme restriction around food can actually lead to eating disorders. And a lot of times these people who have these millions of views on why they're not vegan anymore also have a sprinkling of some disordered eating at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And restriction really just maybe not necessarily leads to it, but definitely can contribute to issues and problems.
Mm-hmm. It's not veganism that fails
Mm-hmm.
people. It's the extremely restrictive
Yes.
diet.
Yeah.
Because veganism, going vegan in and of itself, is not extremely restrictive.
Right.
Some people on the surface think it is.
Yeah.
And some people have even told me, wow, you're vegan. That's so extreme. And I'm like, look at my week, what I eat in a week.
Yeah.
There is nothing extreme about the way I'm eating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how you define extreme,
Yeah.
honey, but
It's actually a pretty standard American diet sometimes, just veganized.
if you're talking about flavor, it's extremely flavorful,
Yeah.
extremely fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
But restrictive? No.
No, not restrict. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people fall into is restriction, and that leads to issues, concerns.
Right. And some people might say, well, I'm going for better health, or I'm reaching for this and that. And so, Tony, I love what you're talking about, but I can't eat the way you eat and blah, blah, blah. Well, I would say it's all about balance, because if you want to restrict to a point, you can, but find a healthy, sustainable balance within that.
Yeah.
Because I have achieved pretty much all the things that people changing their diet for health want to achieve. Lower cholesterol. I have the lowest cholesterol imaginable. Triglycerides, like all my blood work is beautiful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it's weight loss, you can do that. I've achieved that. Like you can achieve anything you want while still having all the foods that you enjoy. Ice cream, donuts, whatever it is. It's about a healthy balance, right?
Yes. I have been on a undiet tip lately. I've been exploring that world and learning about diet culture and how that permeates pretty much every aspect of our society. And so it's been very interesting to look at those things in that aspect and sort of look at my thinking and try to undo that. And so in that realm of thinking, I have worked on nothing is restricted. If I want burgers and fries and soda and then ice cream for dessert, I'm going to have it. I'm just making it vegan. And it's just as delicious. And I can still have that. And I've actually found that not restricting stuff because a food is quote unquote bad, even a veganized junk food is quote unquote bad, not restricting has been more helpful for me not binge eating and not craving these things than anything I've ever done before in my life.
Absolutely.
And so that's been really helpful. And then I didn't gain any extra weight in the midst of all that. I mean, we put on a couple pounds for the during the pandemic that first year, but actually those came off pretty easily. I'm back to whatever I was pre-pandemic in 2020, you know? And so I'm maintaining where I'm at. So I'm not actually gaining any. That's been a thing for me exploring, is not having that restriction at all. And so now at first it might be a little hard to achieve that balance you're talking about, because people are so used to restricting, and these feel like forbidden foods or bad foods. Like these are all things that we're told, they're bad foods. Well, your body's getting energy from them. They're feeding your body. Your body's using this food as fuel. So at first, maybe I had a lot of burgers and fries and soda and ice cream and cookies and chips and dip and tacos. And maybe I had a lot of that. But it's really over time, I've leveled out now, because there are just as many times that I'm like, I want my roasted broccoli and tomatoes. I want, this stuffed squash. Like I was the one who said I wanted stuffed squash the other day with the roasted broccoli and tomato. Like I am now also craving and wanting things that have what some might consider more nutrients. They're more nutritious. Basically, they're more whole foodsy and not junk food.
And they are more nutrient dense.
Right. They're more nutrient dense.
That's a fact, yeah.
Yes. So that balance is now coming. You know what I mean? When I was just like, I'm done with this restrictive way of thinking around food, this, like, I'm going to look at this undiet thing and what is that about? And that's been way more helpful than anything else before. So I do think a balance is achievable, but there's also a mindset thing that we're just not aware of. Like
Yeah.
diet culture really permeates, oh my gosh, everything. It's amazing.
Yeah. And there's, I mean, we could talk about this forever, but like, I think the takeaway is that make sure whatever you're doing is sustainable.
I think so. I think that's yes, you don't want so restrictive that you can't sustain it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the main takeaway for how to not be an ex-vegan is it has to be sustainable for you. And whatever that looks like for you is going to be unique for you, and it's okay. It doesn't have to look like anybody else.
That part. And I was going to make one more point just about the whole health thing, you know, like, because the reason I brought it up was just that I've never restricted anything except animal foods.
Right.
That's the only thing that I have completely not allowed myself to have.
Yeah.
And I've achieved major gains, if you will, in health.
Victories. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a bad word. Major victories health-wise.
In your health, yeah.
It's taken time and work and consistency and all these things, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The only restriction is animal foods.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And the lastly, you know, just for like that people who are really concerned about their health, you know, there's lots of plant-based doctors who are known for being whole foods, plant-based advocates, and that's what they do. They write books, they do clinical trials. They're like the people on this, right?
Yeah.
I've hung out, not with, but around. We're not friends, but I've been in the room hanging out when they're eating dinner, eating lunch, having refreshments.
Mm-hmm.
They are not like, turn my nose away from a Beyond Burger or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Like I've done events and hosted events and stuff like that. They'll eat, you know, vegan meatballs with barbecue sauce. Like they'll eat all those things, desserts even. You know what I mean? They're not like, they're not extreme like these YouTubers are extreme.
Yeah.
And they are the health gurus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I just find that interesting. Like it's the balance thing, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to name names and throw anyone out there, but y'all know who I'm talking about, I'm sure.
And I feel like a lot of these, you know, a number of the videos, one of the reasons ends up being a health deficiency, like a nutrient or a mineral or something. Oh, it's deficient in this. And that can happen on any kind of restrictive eating plan.
Exactly.
It's not unique to a plant-based vegan diet. So again, variety and not having a super restrictive diet. And then even if you're still deficient or absorption issues or, you know, there's some, you know, unique, not very common things that might come up in relation to your diet. Again, there are plant-based doctors, plant-based nutritionists that you can go to before coming off of a vegan diet, before coming off of a plant-based diet. Mm-hmm. So go check with a plant-based health professional, nutritionist, a doctor, whatever you can get your access to, whatever you can get your hands on in that department, if your goal is to truly stay plant-based and vegan.
Right, exactly. And that should always be your go-to. This podcast is not intended to be medical advice.
Right, exactly. But we haven't talked a lot about health stuff because and weight loss and all of that kind of thing, because that's not our focus. That's not what we're going for. And there's a lot of other really great podcasts that have guests or have that focus. A new one that I've discovered is Plant Proof with Simon Hill. And he has a new book. We just got it. We're going to start reading it. But there is loads and loads and loads of information in that. He is a nutritionist and he speaks with experts. He reads all the research and digests it down for you. And that is a really thorough, good place to go for sort of that aspect of a vegan eating plan, diet, plant-based stuff. Mm-hmm.
There's also the Exam Room podcast by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Another one with dietitians and physicians having those discussions. And then we have a couple episodes on our very Teach Me How to Vegan podcast with a registered dietitian where we delve deeper into it. But that's the takeaway: is the extremity, the restriction, and the sustainability of your diet.
Yeah.
The next common theme that I see is they have questionable whys. You know, I went vegan because I wanted to lose 40 more pounds and get down to a size 1. Or, you know, I went
Again,
vegan.
an extreme, possibly, depending on their height and their metabolism and their body size and all sorts of other things that go into play.
Right. Or maybe it was like I went vegan because I wanted to cure my cancer. And then it didn't cure my cancer, so I'm not vegan anymore. Like, well, it might help, but veganism is not a cure for cancer.
Right. It's not a cure-all.
You know what I mean? Or just as a random example, I've seen some really questionable whys out there.
Well, and I think it's the questionable whys really is, it boils down to extreme whys because it's almost a goalpost that can't be reached. It's so difficult that no way of eating would be successful in that.
Yeah. Or if someone goes vegan for somebody else, like I went vegan for my partner.
Right.
Sometimes that's not sustainable either because you have to do what you're doing for you.
It's an extrinsic motivation as opposed to an intrinsic motivation.
Right. Like if you quit smoking for your partner, that's not as sustainable as quitting smoking for yourself.
Right.
Just as an example. So, you know, think about your why. What is your why? And we talked about that in the Staying Motivated is returning to that and focusing on that often.
Making it personal. I think having a personal intrinsic why and motivation is key, or one of the keys.
Yeah. And so another common theme is that they dove in too quickly.
Oh.
Like went from standard American diet, meat and cheese every day, to vegan overnight. And then, I felt weak. I felt lethargic. Well, your body's in shock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Some people can make that switch. Some people can do it and others can't. And it's okay to.
Or they're like, well, I was on the toilet 20 times a day. Well, your body's not used to all that fiber, darling. Yeah. You got to go slow.
Yes. Yeah.
You gotta be a little more methodic than that.
Yep.
Right? It's with anything.
Well, and again, because it's an extreme switch. Because maybe if they went from standard American diet to standard American vegan diet, a veganized version, they might not have that issue. But if they're doing standard American diet to Whole Foods plant-based 30 grams of fiber every day, yeah, you're going to feel a difference there.
I mean, yeah, it depends on your gut and everything else. But even standard American diet, non-vegan to vegan, I mean, Beyond Burgers still have a little bit of fiber. Yeah. That the other burgers don't. They still have no cholesterol. There's still less salt and all these things. So they still might feel like all kinds of weird things going on in their body.
Right.
And then you're like, this vegan thing is wild. I can't do it. Well, if you go from couch to 5K overnight, your body's going to feel like you hit a freight train. And it's not like running a 5K is not an impossible thing that your body can't do.
But you're going to run into a brick wall at the end there. You're going to hit it.
Yeah, you got to be ready for it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's lots of metaphors, but don't dive in too quickly.
Right.
And we talked about that in the baby steps episode, and just a lot in the beginning of this podcast in general. You know, our first episodes was like doing it in steps, making sure that you're not diving in too quickly, so that it is sustainable, so you don't feel all these things going on. And then this kind of leads into the last common theme that I wanted to mention, which is misinformation about nutrition.
Oh, gosh. And this one is so tricky because it is literally everywhere. It's so hard to sift through it. And that's one of the reasons why I like Simon Hill Plant Proof, because he sifts through it for you. And Dr. Greger sifts through it for you also.
They do. But sometimes it's even just basic stuff.
Yeah.
Like people say, well, I didn't have enough energy, so I must need more protein. Okay, protein doesn't give you energy, quote unquote, the way you think it does.
Right.
So it's sometimes very basic stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and sometimes I remember a friend years and years ago that they wanted to go vegetarian at least, and they were cutting out meat. And the guy came to me and was like, you know, Mickey, I'm always feeling tired and this and that. And I was like, well, how much beans are you eating? And he was like, we don't really eat beans. And I said, so here's the thing is iron. You get iron from beans and meat, meat is typically where most people get their iron. And so if you are suddenly not eating the meat, maybe it's the iron that you're missing. Because I used to feel lethargic certain days when, I wasn't getting enough beans and stuff. Sometimes even still, I'm like, we haven't had beans in a while and I'm feeling extra tired. Let's eat some beans tonight. And then I see a difference. And so they added beans. And I said, even if you don't like beans, then try some leafy greens, leafy greens and beans.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. And it was a big difference. So even just knowing like I'm having certain physical reactions like tiredness and fatigue, and what nutrients might feed into that, like iron, and where you typically get it. And then when you cut something out like meat and you're not getting it anymore, where can you get it?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I feel like, and maybe you don't know that, but that's where reading and research and just a little bit can go a long way.
And like you said, there's so much out there. Like the internet can be a great source of information, but it can also be your worst enemy.
Yeah, it's super overwhelming too.
And then there's all these. I feel like I'm gonna get on a soapbox, but I'm gonna try to not to. But there's so many people who present themselves as nutrition experts when they're not.
Yes.
Like
Yep.
People who call themselves health coaches, but they don't actually have the credentials to go behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Or people who are personal trainers and they are, fitness experts, but not nutrition experts.
Yes.
That will give you advice. And so
Yep.
people think, oh yeah, my trainer at Barbells R Us is super shredded, and so he obviously knows exactly what I need. And that's not the case. Or this person who says they're a health coach, well, they don't actually get any training at all. They're just trying to sell you a product.
Right.
And we listen to what they say because
Yeah.
they use big words and sound like they know what they're talking about.
I think also the new term that people are doing, instead of health or fitness now, it's wellness.
Mm-hmm.
Wellness is the new sort of hot buzzword that is replacing and hiding, like diet culture that I said permeates all sorts of stuff. It's really, people are recognizing like, oh, this is a diet or this is health, and that's not what I'm on. And so now it's turned into wellness. A wellness journey, and diet culture is hiding in there as well. And a lot of times these wellness coaches, depending on what their brand of wellness is, might not have the information that you need or accurate information.
Exactly. With all that said, without getting too deep into it, there's a lot of misinformation out there,
Yeah.
and that can derail you essentially. So that's where we are always pointing people back to sources of
Plant-based.
good information.
Yeah, good information.
And
Plant-based.
we're always pointing to Plant Proof and
Physicians Committee.
Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Dr. Greger, nutritionfacts.org. Whenever we have Gabriel Garden, the dietitian, on, he's always drilling those resources down as well, because that's where it's at.
Yeah, and there is a lot of plant-based options to help you stay the course.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
In whatever you feel like, oh, I'm lacking this, or I need to see a doctor about this. There are plant-based doctors, plant-based options, or people who maybe are not plant-based, doctors who are not necessarily plant-based but trained in that. Mm-hmm. So
they just have to be knowledgeable in
yeah.
it. That's the thing.
Yes.
All right. So another thing that I wanted to touch on is how people define vegan and how people define like falling off the wagon, quote unquote.
Right.
Because this can be another thing that derails people. Essentially, is they're like, well, I've just been craving cheese and I had a pizza and now I'm not vegan anymore. We've heard this actually a lot of times, right? Like, well, I've just been eating cheese every day for the last month because I just gave in, and then I'm not vegan anymore.
Okay, be not vegan and only eat cheese.
Right. So yeah, that doesn't mean
be
you have
vegan
to,
except for cheese. Then
you don't have to completely spiral
right.
all the way back
Right.
to square one.
Right.
You can just maintain and then try and get yourself back to where you want to be.
Right.
Or you don't even have to spiral to having cheese all the time.
Right.
Like if you caved and you had cheese one time, that doesn't mean you're not vegan anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Like I always use all these analogies for people, whatever they're into. Like if you know what I mean? Somebody who's a major Isotopes fan, right? You're an Isotopes fanatic. If you miss one game, you're not no longer an Isotopes
Right,
fanatic.
yeah.
You know what I mean? You just
Yeah.
missed one game.
Yep. If you don't go to all the Lobo games,
You're not
all the Aggie games, you're still a fan.
right.
Yeah.
You don't have to, well, I missed one game, so I'll just never go to a game again and I'm just not that anymore.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
No, right. And so
Right?
apply that to being vegan, being plant-based.
Exactly. And so again, this doesn't give you the green light. Like, oh, I can just fall off the wagon whenever I want because I'm still vegan, so I'll just have cheese whenever I feel like it. And then it turns into once a week and then every 2 days. And I'm still vegan, I just give in every once in a while. That's not what we're talking about, right? If you care about the Lobos, you're not just going to never ever watch a game ever again or just give yourself excuses. It's about doing your best, your genuine best that you can do.
Yeah.
Right? Because we also talked about this in the Stages of Change episode and how when you're making the change, there's all these different stages and people forget or don't talk about the last stage, which is lapse and relapse.
Yes. Yep.
And it's an inevitable part of behavior change. You're going to have a lapse or a relapse. So knowing that doesn't mean you're terrible. It doesn't mean you're not good enough or you're not vegan enough. You don't have to broadcast it and tell the whole world about it, but it happened.
Yeah.
And now we're back.
Yeah.
So just, think about that. So yeah, going back to like what you said earlier with the be vegan except cheese. Well, it depends on where people are because like I said, it's not like the green light to just be vegan except cheese, but some people just it's not sustainable.
Right.
Because there's 5 million other factors that go into how we eat and how we choose to eat and how we live our lives. Right. And so it's not just like, yeah, go vegan except cheese. And then I threw in the caveat, like, and then try to get yourself back to where you want to be. So when you have capacity, ability, accessibility to cut out the cheese, then you can. But, people will use that as an excuse to eat everything else under the sun.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'll just have beef tacos and this and that because I can't be vegan because of the cheese. So I just, that's
won't
when
be vegan at all.
Right. So I just won't even try.
I won't do anything else. Yeah.
That's when it's like, well, be vegan except for cheese. Then you can see what it's like to not have meat and to not have eggs and to
Right.
not have all these other things. And when you become accustomed to that and that becomes second nature, that becomes autopilot for you, then you work on tackling cheese. Because we
Yeah.
talked about this too in, I think, the baby steps episode, how you have to find what your last thing is to go.
Yes. Yes.
Because that way you work on everything else
And-
reinventing all your meals or reimagining all your meals. And then you tackle that last thing that's really hard.
Yeah. And it might be that the last thing you cut out is the one you relapse on. And then just recognize it's going to happen. It's okay. It's not a free pass to eat all these things under the sun. I can just have my cheese and try again at the next meal, my next snack, the next day, whatever.
The very next thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not that mentality of, well, I ruined the day, so I'll just eat whatever for the day. I ruined the week. I ruined the month. I ruined my New Year resolution.
Right.
I'll try again next year.
Right.
And then I just had a couple more things that I wanted to talk about in this episode with how to avoid
Being an ex-vegan.
being an ex-vegan. So a couple things that I've been looking at recently, I'm always interested in behavior change theory and reading and looking at stuff like that. Came across this article, which was based on the work of Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so, because I thought this was interesting because everything we've talked about was actually spot on with this.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, I'm just like, that's why I wanted to bring it up and talk about it, was because according to this author, there are 3 necessary components for behavior change. You need a desire, which is the why.
Yep.
You need knowledge, which is the what. And you need skill, which is the how. Right?
Yes.
That's the trifecta. And I think that's what we've based this entire podcast on.
Yeah.
We talked about the why and
Yeah.
and keeping your why in mind and all of that. And then the what, that's the knowledge, like knowing what you're doing. What are we eating? What are we not eating? What's available to us? What products are out there? And then the skill, how? How do you put it in play? How do you cook? How do you prepare these
Yeah.
foods? Where do you access this stuff? The practicality. But then taking it one step further, behavior change has to be motivated by a higher purpose, by the willingness to subordinate what you think you want now for what you want later.
And see, ooh, that's good.
Right?
I just had a little self-reflective thought that because I feel like there's aspects that I'm really good at that with. I think like staying vegan is one. Like I got it done. Never not going to be vegan. You know what I mean? Like barring the end of the world, barring a societal collapse,
barring being stranded on a desert island.
Right. Never not going to be vegan. You know, got that down. But daily exercise habit, nope.
Right. Because you're not there where what you want right now is to just lounge and watch a movie.
Right.
Later, I want to be fit. And
Right.
so you have to make the connection where what you want later is more important than what you want right now.
Yes. Yep.
I thought that was deep.
That's
it's exactly
helpful.
what you said too, because that's why we're vegan, because right now I want a payday candy bar. But, later on, I'm going to want to feel like I did not participate in the exploitation of animals. That is far more important than the taste of that payday that I want right now.
Yeah. So I think the trick then for us, because I will, or for myself, use I statements.
I statements.
Okay, so I think the trick is then, and I know that I'll need to do this, not necessarily for staying vegan, but for other things in my life. So for maybe other people, there's an area that you've been able to do that what the later payoff is takes precedent over whatever the moment is now. So you got to figure out, what was that connection? What was the connection for me that I'm just like never not going to be vegan, and that the later payout is more important to me than the moment right now, or whatever it is right in front of me. So whatever that connection is, I need to find that thread and then use that in the other things that I want to do. Like I want to have a daily exercise habit, even if it's just walking longer than just the dog, you know what I mean? Or if it's meditation or whatever it is. So if you're struggling with staying vegan, find something you've already done that with, that the future was more important. And so now the habit is like, I'm going to thank myself later for doing this now. Whatever that connection was, apply it to staying vegan.
Yeah.
Figure out that connection there. For me, I need to do it with other things. It's not staying vegan, but I think that's the trick. That's what I need to do for myself anyway.
Yeah. That's good stuff, huh?
That was really good, because that is what it,
light bulb. It was a big light bulb for me.
Yeah.
And another little tidbit, this comes from the book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson. He talked about sometimes you need to take action before you get motivated.
Yes.
Like a lot of us are just waiting for the motivation. I want to be vegan, but the motivation is just not there. I know it's going to come at some point.
Yep.
Sometimes action, if you just force yourself to take action, then you start getting motivated.
Yes.
Right? Like you want to redo the room. It's daunting. You're not motivated, blah, blah, blah. Just force yourself to start painting a wall. And then you paint that wall. And then that was painful because you had to force yourself into it. But then you start getting motivated because it looks good and you feel good and you're making progress. And then you feel motivated and the rest of it's easy.
Yeah. And I think James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which another one we recently got that we're going to start. I think that is the premise too. And he breaks it down even further to even smaller steps, because in the first chapter or someplace, he talks about a 1% increase. Which seems like it's so marginal, it doesn't even matter. But over time, it accumulates. So that if you improve just 1% each day, by the end of the year, that 1% stacks up and adds to itself. And it was like 38% or more or something like that throughout the year or throughout this extended time. And so I think that book goes even small. I'm not very far. But I think his talks about how do you get to even the point where you can force yourself to do it. Because sometimes for me, I'm like, I want to go for this wonderful long walk. How do I even get to force myself? Like, just get out the door at this point. What do I need to do for that? Do I need to put my shoes next to my bed? Do I need to put my shoes and my socks? Do I need to have my water ready to go? Like, what are the small 1% improvement, the small steps that will add up over time to help get me out the door, to help me walking more and getting to whatever it is the goal is?
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I'm glad you brought that up because I also came across an article written by James Clear that's basically like an excerpt from his book about habit stacking.
Yes.
And this is where I think that comes into play, where, for people who don't have time or capacity to read all these books that we like to read.
Yeah.
I think this concept of habit stacking is really good. And this is what you were talking about and can be applied to people going or staying vegan. Because what he talks about is that we have habits that are ingrained in us that we don't even think about. Brushing your teeth every day. We wish our kids would get it ingrained autopilot, but anyway, I do things without even thinking about it. I brush my teeth. Some people brew coffee every morning without even thinking about it.
Yeah. Clearing the table.
Different stuff like that, you're going to do like clockwork, checking the mail.
Yeah.
Everyone has their daily routines that happen every single day like clockwork. Or every single week, maybe. Like if you water your plant every single Saturday morning and you're going to do that on autopilot, then you pick one of those habits that you do with the frequency that you want to add a new habit and you stack it. So you tell yourself, like you said, you open the curtains every single morning.
I do.
Without that's what you do. So put your shoes next to the curtain. So when I open my curtains, I'm going to put my shoes on and go for a walk.
Yeah.
Or, somebody who brews coffee every single morning, tell yourself, when I brew coffee, I'm going to do 10 push-ups while it brews.
Or I'm going to cut this apple to eat this apple.
Right.
Because maybe it's because we also talk about adding something as opposed to taking something away. Restricting. Adding, if you're trying to try to add something, the food in as opposed to taking something away. So maybe you want to not eat a donut with your coffee. You want to eat an apple with your coffee, or, an apple in addition to your donut with your coffee, to have that whole fruit.
Right.
And all the yumminess that goes with it. Then, my coffee's going to brew. I'm going to cut my apple and then get my donut or whatever.
So habit
muffin.
Stack. Yep.
Yeah.
I actually have done that too. Like if I eat a banana first, I won't eat as much food later. Like if you make muffins, I'm going to want to eat like 3 muffins.
Yes.
But if I don't want like fruit with my meal, it doesn't sound good. But if I eat a banana while my tea brews, then I'll have less muffins later because the banana does its thing.
Yeah.
So and I've done this without even knowing it. Like
you habit stack
while
without
my coffee
knowing.
brews, while my tea brews, I'm gonna eat a banana because I wouldn't think to otherwise. So yeah, I'll of course link that article and everything else that we've referenced. But I just think that could be a really good thing to help people make those changes as well. More tools to help you
stay the course.
Put these changes into play and then stay the course.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm excited to read Atomic Habits because I think there's going to be so much more for us to talk about later on.
Well, you were funny when you, I really like this habit stacking. I really like this. Who wrote this? Before he even told me who, I was like, James Clear, didn't he?
Yeah.
Atomic Habits. It's an excerpt.
Yep. I was like, look, this is good stuff. And you're like, that sounds like James Clear. It is. He's like, this is basically chapter so-and-so from Atomic Habits. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more for us to break down from that book and maybe more on the series of staying vegan, staying the course.
Yeah, that we can apply from that book.
Yeah. So hopefully this conversation was helpful. Any questions or anything you want us to elaborate on more, please reach out. We'd love to know what is helping people stay the course, what's helping people on their journey in these types of episodes where we're not just talking about glorious food.
Yes.
So as always, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. We release new episodes every 2 weeks. You can always email us at plantbased@apnm.org. Check out our website, apnm.org/plantbased for classes, recipes, and more resources.
See you in 2 weeks.